Are USC and UCLA going to get some company on the West Coast in the Big Ten? Did the Big Ten promise USC and UCLA some company? Welcome to the Voice of College Football, the game we all love. We discuss it each and every day with you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here. If you enjoy the content, even if you don't agree with me, please like the video and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. All right. Washington, Oregon, they've applied to the Big Ten. They did it last summer after the Big Ten agreed with USC and UCLA and brought them on board. So we know Washington, Oregon, despite all the rumors to the Big 12, and they may end up in the Big 12. They may remain in the Pac-12, and somehow that league may become stabilized. But there's a big possibility because that's what they want, is to join the Big Ten. All right, we also have some options on the West Coast in the San Francisco area with Stanford and Cal. Many times people will say, Mark, Stanford sucks, Cal sucks. Well, if you're younger than 15 years old, I can understand that response. But Stanford was a really good football program just 5 years ago. They were a near elite football program 10 years ago. And of course, the academics are huge in the Big Ten. They're huge in every conference, truth be known, but especially in the Big Ten. The endowment, the money, the market size in terms of television. Stanford doesn't fill the stadium, doesn't come close to filling an end zone for most of these games in the Pac-12. But you send Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and others to the West Coast and watch the stadium fill. Cal as well, an academic giant, and they can be competent on the football field, and they would be a partner with Stanford, of course. So let's look at what the Big Ten would look like with those four on board, and now we've got a Big Ten, a Big 20. Let's take a look. So the Big Ten could go to a three-division format. With 20 teams, they would have two 7-team divisions and one 6-team division, and you know what? It comes out really clean. Look at the West Coast. Everybody stays in that division. It's almost like a mini Pac-12 is basically what it is. You got half the Pac-12 right there with Washington, Oregon, Stanford, Cal, USC, and UCLA. Move it to the Big Ten Central Division, and what do you have? Well, you've got the current Big Ten Western Division. Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska, Illinois, Northwestern, and Purdue. Look familiar? Does this look familiar? The Big Ten Eastern Division. Ohio State, Michigan. Penn State, Michigan State, Maryland, Indiana, Rutgers. Yes, it's the Big Ten configuration of the 14 teams as it currently stands and has since 2014. So in regards to scheduling, you would play, of course, all the teams in your division. So if you're in the Western Division, you've got 5 division opponents, and then you've got 4 other conference games that would rotate through the other 2 divisions. For the current Western Division and Eastern Division of the Big Ten, you would play 6 division opponents and 3 games that would rotate against the rest of the conference. Therefore, you would face everybody in the Big Ten within 4 years. That's not too bad for a 20-team conference. Now that we're up to 20 teams in the Big Ten, it's impossible to build a regular season format with one conference championship game in which you have a justified, valid champion of the conference. Here's why. You play 9 conference games. You're a particular team. You play 9 conference games. You've taken away 10 teams from the field in the Big Ten. There are 10 teams out there that you have not played in the regular season. Therefore, you got to go to a mini format in regards to a playoff format, and this is what it could look like based on last year's results. If you look at 2022, you've got division champions. So this is the way we would set it up. 3 division champions, 1 wild card, the team with the best record, and you go through a series of tiebreakers that we're not going to detail here, but you use an NFL-style model to determine, starting with head-to-head, of course, the wild card team. So your division champions from last season, USC, Purdue, and Michigan. Your wild card clearly is Ohio State with 1 conference loss. Therefore, based on 2022 results, we would have seen Michigan, Purdue in a semifinal game, USC and Ohio State in the other semifinal game based on record. You don't like that one? Let's go to a pod system. Let's go to smaller units playing more frequently against those particular rivals. And again, as I've noted in all these videos, if you follow me here at the Voice of College Football, then you know that we're protecting the rivalries. Don't worry about it. The pods could look like this, the California pod. And I'm not proposing that it be called the California pod, but that's what it is. You go with your own naming convention. USC, UCLA, Stanford, and Cal. That's a nice little pod. So is this. Oregon, Washington, and then the two most Western teams from the existing Big Ten make up the Western Division. The Huskies, the Ducks, Iowa, and Nebraska. Then we go to the North Division. Minnesota, Wisconsin, of course, followed by Illinois and Northwestern. We're keeping rivalries together. Look at this. To the Central Division. Ohio State, Michigan, Purdue, Indiana. Then also the Eastern Division. We've got Penn State, we've got Michigan State, we got Rutgers, and we've got Maryland. Those are pods of 4, 5 different pods. And your 4 division champions just flat out play, and that makes it very simple. Although 4 different teams would have made the playoffs under this format as opposed to the other format we propose, where we would have a first-round game of Michigan, Washington, the other game, USC, and Penn State. In terms of the schedule, you play the 3 teams in your pod or division. Then you've got 6 other games that rotate throughout the rest of the conference. And again, we're not going to dive deep into scheduling, but it can be figured out in regards to protecting rivalries first and foremost. And then you go from there. And obviously, you want to build schedules that are equal and fair for competitive balance and to justify the championship. There it is, folks. Do you like it? The Big 10? The Big 20? Well, it's a brand name. They're going to stay with the Big 10. They didn't change when they added Penn State in 1993, 30 years ago. So people that propose, oh, well, they're going to have to change the name. No, they won't. It's a brand name. It's the Big 10/20. Leave your comments below whether you like these pods and the scheduling system and so forth right here at the Voice of College Football. I drafted this scheduling format for the SEC and its permanent opponents months and months and months and months ago. I put off creating the video, but I've been prompted by the comments of Nick Saban. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. We break down the game we all love each and every day with you. Based on your participation, we've got the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. All right, let's get to it. Brian Kelly, LSU head coach, came out the other day, and he was talking tough. And on one hand, I admire what he had to say. As he stated when he became the LSU head coach, I came to the SEC to play the best. And so he restated that to say, I don't care who we play. I want to play the best. Give me Alabama. Give me Texas A&M. Give me, and he named some other schools. Well, Brian Kelly is going to have to play whom the SEC determines that LSU's common opponents and permanent opponents are going to be. So regardless, he might as well talk tough because he's going to have to play the schedule that's given to him. So he might as well say, bring it on. Nick Saban, on the other hand, who's been an advocate for the 9-game conference schedule, which I completely agree with. That's a must at this point. You've got 16 teams now with Oklahoma and Texas jumping on board in 2024. And if you've got an 8-game conference season, then you miss 7 opponents. There are 7 teams in the league that you don't play each and every season, and you're trying to justify and validate a championship. Difficult to do when you don't play 7 of the other teams in the conference. All right, so the SEC needs to go to 9 games, and they're most likely going to do this with the 3-6-6 model, meaning that you play 3 permanent opponents each season. Then you divide the other 12 teams in the league into groups of 6, and you alternate back and forth. So if you're upset about whom your team is going to have to play each and every season or who you're not going to get to play each and every season, understand it's not that huge of a deal because there's not going to be a team in the conference, most likely, if it's set up in this particular manner, that you don't play at least every other year or at the outside every 3 years. So it's not really that big a deal, especially if it's grouped 6 and 6 and you alternate those 2 groups. You're going to play everybody in the conference at least once every other year. But Nick Saban comes out and says, well, we were given LSU, Tennessee, and Auburn. I don't know how they came up with that decision. If there is a school in the country whose rivalries are more defined and more obvious than Alabama, there are very few. The Iron Bowl. I don't need to say anything else. It's the Iron Bowl. It's got to be played. Alabama, Auburn. The Tennessee rivalry. Legit and nationally recognized. Mid-October matchup between the Vols and the Tide. That's got to be played. And then the LSU game. Of course, the Tide and the Tigers have competed in the SEC for generations. But in addition to that, because of the two prominence of the programs over the last 15 years, that has become a staple and one of the highest viewed games on the college football map each and every year. So that's where they came up with it, Coach Saban. All right, let's look at our format and the permanent opponents that we are giving each team in the SEC. Keep in mind that if you've got a criticism of any one particular team, you really can't criticize one of these teams' opponents that we've given it, because you've got to map out the entire conference, because if you nitpick in any one area, it may not work when you put all the puzzle pieces together. So let's check it out, starting with the top in Arkansas. We've got the Hogs' permanent opponents as Texas. That's an old Southwest Conference rivalry that I hold near and dear, as many folks in Texas and Arkansas do as well. That's got to be played. Arkansas, Texas, they are opponents that need to happen every year. Then also Texas A&M. Think about this. The SEC has pushed this narrative of this being a rivalry game for the last 11 years since the Aggies have joined the SEC, and they've played it in Jerry's world, so they've made it a standout marquee matchup. So why not continue it? Arkansas, Texas A&M. Then the other game that the SEC has pushed since Mizzou's entry into the SEC has been Arkansas, Missouri on Black Friday, so we will keep it. Arkansas, you've got Texas, Texas A&M, and Mizzou. On to Nick Saban in Alabama. Auburn, Tennessee, we've got them with Mississippi State. I've got no issue with LSU, of course, for money reasons, TV ratings. The SEC, you would think, would opt for the LSU slot, but I mapped this out months and months and months ago, and I will stay with Auburn, Tennessee. Those are obvious. They need to be played. And then Mississippi State. Alabama and Mississippi State are the two campuses on the SEC landscape that are the closest in distance. It's only an hour away from Starkville to Tuscaloosa. Team number 3 is Auburn. There's the Iron Bowl. Of course, the South's oldest rivalry. Auburn and Georgia, got to be played. And then we also put Ole Miss on Auburn's permanent schedule. Let's move it down to the Florida Gators, and we keep together, of course, the rivalry battle with Georgia, the largest outdoor cocktail party each and every season. Florida plays LSU each and every year. They were designated rivals going back to 1992, so that has stayed in play, and we think that that's strong enough to keep together. It's not necessary. It's not a must, but we would like to keep the Gators and the Tigers together. And then the other third opponent makes total sense, Florida and South Carolina. On to Georgia and a couple matchups that we already noted here against Auburn and Florida, and also Georgia taking on South Carolina. They're border rivals. That makes complete sense as well. Looking at Kentucky, the Tennessee game is a must. That has to be played every year. The other ones to a lesser degree, but still make sense here with Vandy and South Carolina for the Cats. There's LSU, and again, I have no issue if LSU is assigned Alabama based on generations of play, based on prominence of the two programs recently, and it being one of the huge TV matchups each and every season in college football. But I've got LSU with Ole Miss. That's a rivalry. LSU and Ole Miss doesn't have to be played every year, but still a rivalry. Florida and Mississippi State. Ole Miss, Mississippi State, of course, it's the Egg Bowl. That has to be played. It's one of the great rivalries in college football. Ole Miss, we have also put together with LSU and Auburn. Now, as we get deeper down the list, you have heard our explanations for most of these matchups. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, that's the Egg Bowl. Bama and LSU are the other two permanent opponents. At number 10, we got Missouri. Missouri at this point seems to be an attachment, an addendum to the SEC. They're hanging out there in the kind of southwest, but also the northwest. in perspective of the rest of the SEC schools. So we want to bring Missouri back into a place where they belong. Oklahoma was a longtime Big 12 and before that Big 8 rivalry. We've got Arkansas, as we discussed before, and then we also put together Missouri and Texas A&M, put them back together because they joined the league back in 2012, coming in from the Big 12. So they played every year in the Big 12, and then they were separated by the East-West SEC split. Now we get our first newcomer. It's Oklahoma, Texas. One of the greatest rivalries in college football has to be played. As you saw before, we've got OU taking on Mizzou to renew that rivalry from the Big 12. And then we've just basically got a placeholder. So this is the first one that's going to look out of place. But again, you got to put the entire puzzle together to criticize Oklahoma and get this yearly matchup. Vandy, the 12th team we're going to look at is South Carolina. None of these matchups have to be played. They are not hardcore rivalries. At the same time, they have built up over time in the SEC Eastern Division, and they make complete sense. Georgia, Florida, and Kentucky. For Texas A&M, we at this point have seen all of their permanent opponents. They have to play Texas. The Arkansas game makes sense, and then we put Texas A&M back together with old Big 12 opponent Missouri. And the much anticipated newcomers for Texas would look like this: Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Arkansas. And now finally, last but not least, or last and least, would be Vandy. The Tennessee game's got to be played. Yes, they are rivals. And even though Tennessee fans look down on Vandy, they are close together. They're in the same state. The history goes back generations. Got to be played, Vandy and Tennessee. Also, Kentucky makes sense. And then you've got what I would consider to be the only oddball matchup at this entire configuration, in which you're talking about 16 teams and 3 teams per team. That is 48 slots. So this is the only truly oddball selection right here with Vandy and Oklahoma. Build your SEC schedule. Leave your comments down below. I would love to hear what you have to say about which direction the SEC should go. We expect, since the athletic directors are now reviewing what the SEC office has sent to each individual school, they will vet it out. They will come to a decision probably by the SEC meetings in Destin coming up in late May. Let's talk it up right here at the Voice of College Football. Yeah, unfortunately for the Pac-12, because of the time zone, it's difficult to take advantage of the Sunday situation. Let's say if the Pac-12 was in the East, then you say, you know what? We're used to kicking off at noon. Let's kick off at 11 in the morning, and we can almost get a game in before the NFL kicks off at 1. Or we can play some kind of sandwich game between when those 4:30, 4:25, as you mentioned, NFL kick, where the games are typically, it's a lot of Arizona, Seattle type games that may or may not be okay, but a lot of 3-8 teams playing late in the season against each other. Maybe we can sandwich something in that if we catch people's fancy with a really good game when the NFL kicks off at 8:20 and they're watching a game and saying, you know what, we can miss the first quarter of the NFL game because it's 31-27 Oregon Cal. So we want to stay with that, that they could find some of those opportunities. The other one that comes to mind is with the Thursday night, obviously being locked up by the NFL, but that game kicks off at what, 8:20? Maybe kick off a game at 7 Eastern.
Yep.
And again, maybe with the thought that if we have a really good game going, a lot of NFL fans would think, okay, I'll miss the first quarter.
Sure.
Yeah, all things that should be considered. I don't think they can get away with a Sunday night game, unfortunately, because that NFL game just goes too late. If it was an early game, that would be one thing, and maybe the Pac-12 could do a 10 p.m. Eastern time kickoff, but that's just doesn't get it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
great stuff here with Matt.
But I mean, I do think there's room here. I do think there's room here for creativity, and even if we're not talking about Sundays, there's also just room for Saturdays, because college football, like, all right, you see some staggered time slots, but you really don't throughout the industry and throughout the sport. So like a chance to, if you have your a game at 1:30, so the normal windows are noon to 3:30, 3:30 to 7, and then of course the 10 p.m. Window as well, or 7 p.m. Pacific on to 10:30. But having a game at 1:30 Eastern, 10:30 Pacific, having a game at 5:30 Eastern, 2:30 Pacific, just having getting in the middle of those traditional time windows can give perhaps a streaming partner, a streaming service, the idea that, hey, there's going to be lots of people tuning into this game, because even though it's going to be concurrent with other action, and it's not going to be starting at the same time as that big 3:30 game or that big 7 o'clock game. I would like to think that George Kliavkoff is kicking the tires on, seeing what can be done there, and seeing if like a specific non-traditional time slot would be a little bit more attractive to any streaming service or to any potential media partner.
Yeah, and I really think beyond the Thursday, Friday games, to do anything beyond that in Maction style may show signs of maybe a little bit of desperation, may not be the best there, may look a little clownish as not big time college football, Power 5 college football. It's just my thought there.
True. I do think, though, that the exclusivity of the window is still something that is valuable. I think let's also consider that the Pac-12 could go Hawaii style. Like, you have a game at midnight Eastern on Saturday, like the college football cultists, and I say that affectionately, not derisively, that, like, hey, make the Pac-12 your new home for Hawaii time slot football. I mean, that would go down really well with a subset of the national population. And we're not talking huge ratings, but like you'd get the diehards, and it would be a talking point, where, hey, let's all gather around and watch the Apple TV Hawaii time slot game. Like, we could achieve a measure of popularity with a loyal, small but loyal audience. And like, if the Pac-12 wants to get a niche, and like the Pac-12 does, the Pac-12, it's in the West. So like, if there ever is a niche that the Pac-12 can potentially own that no other conference, including the Big 12, can, Hawaii time slot football is another marketing angle that the conference could consider.
Yep. Again, we're not speaking to the masses here, but there's a portion that is just off the rails junky that, yes, Hawaii and New Mexico State at midnight, they're watching, and I'm talking midnight Eastern time. Very few, but they're there. But then there's an added fan, and I'll put myself in this category, where I'll watch any college football game pretty much at any time, but I guess maybe affected to a certain extent by what I do. When I shut this thing down at 2:30 in the morning and I see that Hawaii and New Mexico State are at 37-14 in the third quarter, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm giving up on that. But if it's two Pac-12 teams and it's a good game, then I'm in on that.
So that's an opening, and it's an opening that, when you do not have the leverage in negotiations, that's something to consider.
The second biggest storyline, I would say, absolutely was the arrival of Garrett Riley, and the actual tone of the practice, the drills, they were different than what we've been accustomed to seeing. Clemson usually runs these tempo drills and it's the first team, second team, third team offense, but they run them against air. There's no defenders on the field. They're just going through the drills. Well, yesterday it was good on good. It was the first string offense, first string defense, and they were going at it. I think that is something maybe Dabo Swinney is putting in place to get these guys overcome these past couple seasons, get them to take another that step back to where they were, to get them back into the college football playoff. And I think they're doing a lot of different things. The drills were different. The quarterback drills were different. I'm not going to sit here and dive into every detail, but they were different than what we've seen in the past. And I heard Garrett Riley telling Cade Klubnik yesterday that he was surprised with how quickly he was picking up on his lingo. That made it so much easier to install stuff. And Klubnik talked yesterday after practice about how last year it looked like, they'd go into games with a play call sheet that was 80 plays, and it looks like this year it's going to be down to around 30 plays. So the offense is simplified. They ran 15 plays yesterday, but they ran them out of different formations, personnel groupings, and that's what they did for 2 hours. They ran 15 plays, and that's the goal. And he said Garrett Riley told him he don't care if the defense knows what's coming. He still wants to be able to beat them with it doesn't matter if the play is executed, they should still have success.
Yeah, so what you talked about there off the top in regards to the difference in making it a more challenging practice right out of the gate, I got to think that that really challenges everybody's mindset, regardless of how comfortable you think you are as a first teamer, because it sounds like in the past where you could just run against air as long as let's say you're a wide receiver, the play, your route, you're going to catch the ball, you're going to do what you need to do. And you kind of, I don't want to say coast, but there's not that adversity. There's not that challenge, and you make your way to fall. And then you think, okay, in August, we're going to have those kind of practices, as opposed to, man, day one, I got somebody in my face. And if, this is one-on-one, one of us is going to look bad here.
Yeah. And early on in the drill, Klubnik tossed up a ball down the field. It was a little wobbly. Andrew Makuba intercepted it. It was intended for Antonio Williams, or I can't remember which one it was. I can't remember who it was intended for now. But and Makuba got up trash talking. It was intense, man. They were going at it, and it was fun to watch.
Good stuff. Jason Priester's on the line. AllClemsonTigers.com. Catch his work right there, of course, covering Clemson football. And it's baseball season, too. So check out his work, talking some Clemson baseball as well.
It's going to be interesting to see how those quarterbacks at Ohio State perform. I know Wisconsin has a slew of quarterback transfers coming in, kind of who emerges there. You might get a clearer picture there on who the 2 or maybe 3 guys are that are battling for that job, but it's a wide open race. But the one that I'm most excited about is Jeff Sims at Nebraska. I just think there's a potential for a massive kind of unveiling of one of the better players in college football, because I think he's very undervalued at what he did at Georgia Tech going back to his freshman year. I mean, he wasn't as consistent a thrower as you want, but he is a dynamic athlete, and I think he's a much better thrower than people believe. I know I talked to a coach that was at Georgia Tech last year, and they were like, I'm telling you, this kid is special. Watch out for him.
It's great that you bring up this Jeff Sims angle, because I don't know that a lot of people are talking about that, because they assume that Casey Thompson's the starter. But obviously he brings a dimension that Casey Thompson doesn't. So if you can bring up that passing ability anywhere close to Thompson, then depending on how you want to run your offense and how you want to approach it, then that could be a deciding factor. And, I kind of like it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the first names that pops into my mind when I think Jeff Sims and maybe what the ceiling could be as a thrower is what we've seen out of Jordan Travis for the last 2 to 3 years, where I said a couple of years ago, I said, this guy's a dynamic playmaker, but he's not an ACC starting caliber quarterback by any stretch. He doesn't know where the ball's going half the time. And then he got better significantly the next year where he was capable. And then the next year he takes another huge leap. And maybe Jeff Sims is capable of doing something like that.
I think he is. I really think he is. And you know, I really like him on film, but just talking to coaches that were in the program with him has kind of elevated his stock to me. I feel like he's an untapped resource. And I really have faith in Matt Rule and his coaching staff that he compiled that they're going to level that kid up when it comes to just playing quarterback outside of just being a great athlete. He kind of reminds me of Malik Cunningham a little bit from Louisville, where just a really dynamic athlete, not a great thrower, but can throw it. And I think that Matt Rule's the perfect coach and his staff to really polish him up as a true quarterback, because he's always going to be a freaky athlete. He's always going to be able to run. He's always going to have those traits. It's just, can they make him a consistent, you know, accurate quarterback? That's going to be the big question mark.
Breaking down Clemson position by position, we got Jason Priester on the line. Breaking down the Tigers, we've moved on to the defense. We took care of the defensive line. Let's check out the linebackers. Trenton Simpson is 72 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. He moves on. I got to think Jeremiah Trotter is the obvious leader of this group coming back.
Yeah, Jeremiah Trotter be middle linebacker. Barrett Carter will be the weak side guy, and then Wade Woodaz will slide into that Sam role. He was taking the first string reps yesterday. Behind them, you're looking at guys like TJ Dudley. We'll see how much impact the freshman could have. D. Creighton, Jamal Anderson. Not Clemson's deepest position. Wouldn't say they're paper thin. They're not as deep as they have been in the past, due to Levante Bentley transferring out and Keith McGuire deciding to give up football. But a lot of talent, just got to stay healthy. You keep Carter and Trotter and Woodaz healthy, you'll probably be – it's going to be a very good defense in that front seven. And they are very high on TJ Dudley. They think he is going to be really good.
All right. Very good, Jason. We appreciate you stopping by, as always, breaking down the Clemson defense. We will catch up with the secondary here at some point, talk some special teams as well. When's the next trip out to practice?
This afternoon.
Okay. Back out there.
Today, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the first 3 days, they are letting the media in to watch a little bit, about 40, 45 minutes.
Nice. Well, folks, you got to track Jason's work there. It's all ClemsonTigers.com, right?
That's it. All ClemsonTigers.com.
Don't listen to me, folks. Read the banner. All ClemsonTigers.com. There it is.
Brand new site, same good content.
There we go. Jason, we always appreciate it. Know you got a ton going on. Thanks for making time for us.
My pleasure, man. Anytime, Mark. Appreciate it.
These extensions and raises to the coaching staff are a small part of the bigger picture of a facilities upgrade and a plan to really upgrade and compete in the SEC. So what do we know about that, Jason?
Yeah, so there was an announcement yesterday that $175 million, I guess, project is the right way to say it. That's going to go before the Board of Regents, and part of that was the raises that you had mentioned. And really, what this is it's a football operations facility. I think is exactly what they're talking about. So this is really kind of off the field amenities for the kids and for the program. So really specifically to like practice field stuff, like weight room, recovery room, things like that. And so Oklahoma had previously spent a decent amount of money getting it up to speed, but I don't think it's quite SEC up to speed. So that was something that Thad Turnipseed noticed initially when he moved over from Clemson to Oklahoma, and something that he talked about a lot last year, just in terms of getting that program where it needs to be, obviously with the looming move to the SEC, and obviously maybe a little bit sooner rather than later now. With that. So I think that's a formality. Typically the way Oklahoma does that is they pay for these things themselves through through grants and donations and things like that. So I think they're, from what I've heard, they're in the process of just kind of evaluating what that might look like and who might be able to do that work. But I think Oklahoma is going above and beyond in terms of the money that they're looking to allocate to this. There was, as this was announced yesterday, there was something floating around Twitter around the amount of money that Florida spent on this, and it was somewhere around the, I think as I looked, around the 90 to 100 million. And you look at it, and it's state of the art, and it's outstanding. So the fact that Oklahoma is doing things like this shows obviously how serious they are in understanding where they're at related to from a facilities perspective as they go into the SEC next year, but also just the urgency that they need to get this done to compete. And really, what this is, it's a recruiting tool, right? It's stuff for these kids, that it's amenities for these kids that they will that they'll look at when they go on these visits. They look at the weight room, they look at the recovery room, they look at all of these different things that you have available for the kids. And that's part of, that's the new shiny toy. That's part of what they're what a lot of these kids are looking at. So I think it's really certainly timely, but I think it's something that will be certainly a big benefit from a recruiting perspective going forward for Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I know that you're addressing it for long-term concerns, and you should be as an Oklahoma guy, and everybody here watching and listening from an Oklahoma standpoint, looking down the road and preparing the team and the program for SEC. I'm more interested just to see the Big 12 race this year, because I just think that Texas has an opportunity. They have the ability and the talent to maybe run away from the field. But when has Texas ever done that? We're still waiting for them to pull through on that. So I have no confidence in Sark, and I have no confidence that they're going to actually do that. So what I'm expecting is like this complete free-for-all. You can almost throw out a team in the Big 12 this year, and I could make an argument for about 6 of them winning the conference. So I just think it's going to be a fun season from the standpoint of unpredictability within the Big 12. But you're right. What's much more important is preparing this program for a step up and competing in that league.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Mark. I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's a lot of intrigue into this season. I know we'll have plenty of time to get through that, but you've got, I think at this point most people feel like Texas is probably the odds-on favorite, at least in the early season. I mean, stop me when you've heard this before, but I think
they are really loaded on offense, especially.
They are. So I think they are going to be the odds-on favorite. And you've got Kansas State that's up there. I know TCU's lost a lot, but I think they're still going to be a team. You get to the national championship game, and no matter how that worked out, you still have in terms of how they played last year through the Big 12 itself. So I think you've got a lot of notoriety, and you've got a lot of respect that kind of built on that team. But you've got a few teams, and Oklahoma's one, Baylor's another, that is sort of kind of in the middle of the pack, so to speak, a little bit behind. And we'll see how, because both of those teams had a kind of, you would say, had a disappointing 2022 comparing where they were in the preseason and what those expectations were coming into the season. So I think, I mean, if then you talk about the new kids on the block, so to speak, with BYU, and BYU is probably the best positioned team, I would say, coming in out of Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. But I think that will be interesting to go through. And I mean, and Oklahoma State's one of those teams as well. That's interesting. They've just had a horrible recruiting class by their standards, and they've lost a lot lost a lot of kids off last year's team, and including the quarterback. And so it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. And so, yeah, no, I think I'm with you. I know that a lot of people are excited about 2024 with the SEC, but I'm excited what this new look Big 12 team could look like. Our Big 12, conference could look like this next year.
Yeah, look at all four of these newcomers, and I think there can be a case made for each one of them as being the most prepared to enter the league. I would agree with you that it's BYU right now, but over the past 10 years, Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati have all taken their turns as being the preeminent group of 5 program, and then BYU has been the most consistent historically over the last 40 to 45 years in being a top-notch wherever you want to place them as an independent, a Power 5 or a group of 5. They're somewhere lost in between, but it's going to be obviously more challenging. I've run through the numbers, and all 4 of those programs have basically competed at like a 500 level in terms of wins and losses against the Power 5 in the last 10 or 15 years, but having to play those kind of opponents week after week after week may be a different story. So there might be a bit of just like TCU experienced, a year or 2 that it takes to acclimate, and there's certainly none of them are recruiting at the level that you would expect them to be able to compete if you just look at recruiting rankings. But then again, when has Kansas State ever brought in anything better than like a top 50 class? So they're able to pull it off. So coaching and development is going to be a big key in that. Moving on to a conversation that's drifted into the SEC. The ACC's already figured out their scheduling format going forward. I was amused by Nick Saban's comments about their 3 proposed opponents, common permanent opponents year to year, because the SEC is working through that right now. The conference has doled out the 3 opponents to each school. Now the ADs and the administrations vet that out, and they're going to figure that out here in the next few months and try to get a consensus. And when presented with LSU, Tennessee, and Auburn, Nick Saban made some kind of comment like, I don't know who makes these decisions and how they come up with that, which those 3 are probably the most obvious of almost any school in the country of what 3 opponents you would get. So as we move this on to the Big Ten.
Yeah, they played those 3 schools every year since the 40s probably.
Yeah,
so.
They are the 2 for sure, Tennessee and Auburn. Those are legitimate rivals. And certainly, yes, LSU, Alabama attached at the hip in the SEC Western Division and one of the biggest TV rating draws every year. That's obvious. Moving to the Big Ten and Ohio State, if that 3-6-6 model becomes the thing, which it apparently will be, Steve, we'll start with you in regards to what do you think should be the lineup for the Buckeyes?
Well, Michigan obviously would be 1. I think Penn State would be 2. And 3, I don't really have a strong feeling. Illinois was a school that they played every year, one way or the other, up through about 10 or 15 years ago when they kind of went away from that. And probably as they added Nebraska and then Maryland and Rutgers, it became harder to maintain. Plus, they were in the other division eventually. So I think the first 2 are obvious. The third one could be literally anybody. And I can't think it would be USC. That would just be, God, you'd be going out there every other year. Good God, you don't want that. The most you want to go to the West Coast in this thing is like twice in a 4-year period, not on a 3 in a 4-year period or something like that. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm ambivalent about the third one.
Kevin, what's your take?
Well, Michigan is obvious. I'm not sold on Penn State. Penn State views Ohio State as its rival. Ohio State does not view Penn State as its rival. Obviously, it is the second largest television draw of conference games in the Big Ten, only behind Ohio State and Michigan. But if I'm trying to maximize my television dollars, why not USC? Why not? I mean, if you're going to sit there and forego the yearly Ohio State Penn State game, you have to have another game that is going to be a huge draw. Steve mentions, oh, you don't want to go out there that much. Well, somebody's got to. And if we don't see a situation of where Oregon and Washington or whatever happens and we create a true Western pod of the Big Ten and they are each other's rivals, granted, if you go up from a 16-team league to 18 or 20, what does the math turn into at that point? So I'll say Michigan, USC. Ohio State only has one trophy game, and it's for that big wooden turtle. So let's throw Illinois in there. And I don't particularly like the thought of every other year trip to Champaign. It's kind of a boring trip. I mean, we do get to go eat at Beef House right on the Indiana-Illinois state line, which is a good thing.
The I&I Club right there.
Salad bar, as opposed to, I mean, they've really they're still talking about COVID and changing the world order. You still don't get to go to the salad bar there, which is disappointing. But yeah, Michigan, USC, and Illinois for me.
Yeah, I've done this several times, and I don't think Ohio State needs to stick with Penn State, but I think they will. And I think if you're adding, I don't see the Big Ten adding UCLA and USC and not putting one of those two with Ohio State and probably the other with Michigan. It makes too much television sense, and you'd be leaving something on the table if you didn't do that. And that's completely unfair to Ohio State to have to play those three programs. But moving to a 12-team playoff, there, and in the final rankings last year, before the playoffs, before like the final regular season rankings last year, of the top 12, there were 5 2-loss teams and 2 3-loss teams. So Ohio State could conceivably go 1-2 in those games and have a 2-loss season, be 10-2, and then whatever else happens after that, and still make the playoffs. So yeah, that's going to be a very difficult schedule, but it doesn't necessarily keep them out of the playoffs because those losses would be good losses, assuming those teams are in the playoffs. And and any win that Ohio State gets over those programs, obviously it's going to be beneficial. It is a lot. We say it's a lot, but really, if you look at the programs, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC, I think the people who live in reality will see that there's only really one national title contender, and that's USC. The others are I see you raise your eyebrow. Michigan is not a national title contender. They will never win a national title with Jim Harbaugh. They can go so far, and they don't have the overall skill and depth to and dynamic playmaking to go beyond that. USC, I think, will have enough playmakers to do that. Will they ever have the defense? I think eventually they will, but how much defense? You just need to be able to win a game 50-45, basically. So, USC will eventually even have a defense at some point, maybe. Penn State will always just, be a thorn in the shoe type of thing where now it's stuck in the sock and you're not looking, and then you drive off a cliff and you've now lost at Penn State. So it would be a tough ask because those are all probably any given year in the top 10. But really, USC is perhaps the only title contender of those three.
I don't disagree with you. I just think that's a bold statement. I don't necessarily completely agree with you, but I do think that there's a straight correlation between recruiting rankings and college football playoff winners, and Michigan's not recruiting at the level that they need to win a national championship.
I will say Michigan has a better chance perhaps in a 12 team because other teams could perhaps knock off the teams that they would never be able to. So I still don't see it happening, but they'd have a better chance if somebody beats Georgia or Alabama for them, like in Ohio State, and then they face Ohio State in the finals, and we know what can happen there. I will also say Ohio State going out every other year to California, I don't know if they would hate that I think they wouldn't mind that for recruiting purposes, but then you still have to go play the game.
And if the Pac-12 can't pull together a deal that is attractive and sufficient for a number of schools, we'll see what the plight of that league is, of course,
I
and
don't
whether
even know if
Stanford and
attractive
Cal
is in
come along.
play. I think it's just they have to pull something that's not insulting. I mean, Apple TV, Ion TV. I mean,
WeTV.
I think that they can be
WeTV?
any less visible than Pac-12 Network, and they're well on their way.
WB.
Exactly. I mean, hell, just put them on MTV. MTV doesn't air any music to begin with.
MTV2.
Put them on there between a special edition of the Jersey Shore Family Reunion and 16 and Pregnant, or whatever that show's called. I mean, it's
Oh my God.
the Pac-12.
That's the Big Ten.
Is in. They're on the table right now, and they're coding. That's for you, Sue, as a doctor, El Suzabo. They're coding. It's not going to go well. I don't think they're going to come out the end of this well. I mean, going out and getting SMU and SDSU to bolster the TV rankings, we know what part of the things have to be. And even if you bring them in on an unequal share, you're still having to feed two more mouths at that point. And I understand those two mouths are replacing USC and UCLA, but there's just not going to be enough money there. And Oregon and Washington think way too highly of themselves, as they should, to be getting pennies on the dollar compared to other programs. And Uncle Phil can write as many checks as he wants to. It's not going to matter at the end of the day when that yearly income is not there from the media rights deal.
And then the next domino would be whether the Big Ten accepts Oregon and Washington. Maybe they want all four, including Cal and Stanford. And if they turn down Washington and Oregon, maybe they then, of course, would land in the Big 12. But obviously the preference for Oregon and Washington is the Big Ten.
I still want to see the Big Ten go south. Go grab
I do
Georgia
too.
Tech or something like that. But the ACC grant of rights is insurmountable at this point.
I don't know. UNC is now on board with what Florida State and Clemson are selling, and they're talking about the necessity for unequal distributions. And we've got 3 teams now. They need 5 more to say, to hell with this. And then they can dissolve the ACC, apparently, based on what the charter is. And if you don't have a conference, you really don't have a grant of rights. But who else is going to step on the ledge, and really who can afford to step on that ledge? Because Clemson, Florida State, and UNC can. Not so sure an NC State or a Virginia Tech or some of these other schools or Wake Forest can go and do that alone, because, okay, the ACC is gone, as I have animals fighting in the background as usual. The ACC is gone. Now where are you going to land?
So don't try to mute Kevin. What is what's the number that needs to want to renegotiate this?
I think if you get 8, I think it's 8 teams. That was what I read on Twitter, and we know that Twitter is never incorrect. But that's what I read.
Was there at least a blue check mark?
Yeah, but I think it was like your blue check mark, which you just buy.
That's hurtful. I do, because the money thing here, like, moving forward, the Big Ten, every Big Ten team is going to make like $50 million more a year than every ACC team, which means the SEC is going to make about $42 or $43 million more than every ACC team. So the Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, Duke probably thinks of themselves as more that they should be getting more. Georgia Tech, like other programs, could see this as an opportunity to, even if it's just they're not even wanting to negotiate with the ACC. This is an opportunity to get out. So they will just all, if they can get 8 teams, now then you could see a Georgia Tech go to the Big Ten. Then you could see Clemson and Florida State go to the SEC. And I just the ACC at this point, because they're locked in until 2036 at like $17 million a year per program, and the Mountain West is probably going to have a better deal than that by 2032, because they're going to have whatever the left of the Pac-12 and it's just a non-competitive number, and you've got programs in that conference that want to compete. So maybe the Virginia Techs and the Louisvilles have to be like, okay, we will give you more, but it's still going to be half of what the Big Ten is getting, half of what the SEC is getting, and can those schools even afford to do that? Can Louisville afford to give up more? Sure, they've only been in the ACC for how many years, but that's a lot to ask of the programs who are $17 million is a lot to them, and so now they have to now they only get 11, something like that.
Giving a bigger piece of a smaller pie is all well and good, but it's not necessarily going to be that attractive to the ones warranting those bigger pieces. And then you're exactly right. If you're giving up, if you're going to take a 3/4 share instead of a full share, you're going to take a 2/3 share instead of a full share, then what are you going to do? So, this situation is still very much real of what can happen with all of these conferences. And, I'm here for it. I talked to some people at the Combine who are certainly of the mindset that things could be happening here in the near term. And the near term doesn't mean, days or weeks, but I've even seen one of the national guys who talks exclusively about expansion saying that by the end of March, we could see movement.
Leonard Taylor. There's no way in the world, this young man has all the talent in the world, Mark. The size, the ability. And it's just like he flashes like the Virginia game. He flashes like one or two plays from Texas A&M and then just goes missing. Now, that's a tough thing to do, is to get a young man to play consistently, especially when they have all the intangibles to be that man, okay? I really hope that he could hone his skills. I know that last year under Coach Kevin Steele, they really wanted them to engage and first man the line of scrimmage, then disengage. And LT really fought back and forth with that because, Mark, what he likes to do is shoot gaps. He just go, hey, I'm reading stretch. This guard can't hang with me. I'm just going to go. And that would work well sometimes and work against him sometimes because he would get read. Sometimes they would do a read option on him, and other chances he'll shoot back there. He'll knife back there, get his hand on him and, miss him. Or at times when we were playing such a great scheme where if everybody does their job like Texas A&M, and then he had just made the play before that. He beat the guard again with quickness, Mark, but again, he misses the tackle. And now there's nobody there, and the running back goes, for a 20, 30-yard gain because there was nobody else there because LT did his own thing. Now, when it works, it works. And when it doesn't, it resulted in a big play. Now, in this Coach Guidry scheme, I wonder if he could continue to be a gap shooter. The last guy we watched do that on a consistent basis was R.J. McIntosh. I would also bring up, I'm having a blank here. Number 9, defensive tackle, Gerald Willis. I would think about bringing up Gerald Willis in that one too. But for the most part, you want to talk about somebody that really just shot gaps and quick swim over the top. Over guards, went toe-to-toe with one of the best guards in NFL. And Nelson out of Notre Dame, who's now the Colts, and he's like the consistent best guard in football. And they had a great battle. And it was because of what McIntosh would do. He would just, he's 6'4", 280, but instead of sitting here and trying to play bully ball with you, I'm going to use my quickness, my lateral movement. I know that I can bounce out and back inside. I can rip in you. I can swim right over you while you're just trying to maul me off the ball. And now you're just eating grass off the ground because I just keep going right over top. I think Leonard Taylor can be the same caliber of young man if we just let him loose. Again, The tough part about that is the other guys got to try to make up for that, Mark. Okay, if we got one guy, I talk about this as a Mike linebacker. If I got a guy who I know just wants to do his own thing, then I have to make sure I go opposite, right? So let's say, for example, we got one where he's supposed to loop to the A, and my gap is the B, okay? Because we gap exchange, Mike linebackers and D tackles, right? Well, let's say he's supposed to go A, but he decides to head bob A and club swim back over into the B, and now we're both standing in the B. Now I got to try to scoot back over to the A to get in my gap, as opposed to reading him and knowing, hey, I got a monster in front of me. Wherever you go, I'm going to go opposite. I got you. I'm going to make you right because coach ain't going to yell at both of us for being in the B gap. I'm going to make sure I get over to the A. I'll make sure I get over wherever if you're not there. So you got to have that connection with your linebacker. But I'm really hoping at the point of attack, Leonard Taylor really steps up in that aspect of things. And of course, completely getting rid of guards and tackles. Okay, there were times I've seen tackles step down on him and he didn't really take that well. Or if a guard got good hands on him, but he was young. Okay, he's going into year 3 now. Hopefully really getting his grown man strength and leverage and IQ and all that there. So, I really think that Leonard Taylor can really do some big things for Miami at that defensive tackle position. And we can't wait to see it turn out. What about you, Mark? Leonard Taylor's flashed a little bit for you too. What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, basically, I wondered early, and again, you have coaching background, you have playing background at a higher level than I do. So especially when you're turning on, so you have those two things over me. Then on top of that, if you're watching a Miami game, I know who the players are. You know what to look for. You know their individual games. But I mentioned to you, I think at the time, that I'm watching the game like most people watch the game that have a level of football knowledge. So I'm looking for certain things, but I'm watching the game like you watch the game, and I'm thinking of Virginia in particular, and like somebody really has to be devastating and really has to flash and really has to be beating the guy in front of him. And it's not just always a tackle for loss kind of play where it's obvious, okay, somebody made a great play, they beat their man, tackle for loss. No, it was sometimes the play went away from him. Sometimes there was no stat to back it up. It was just, I could just see he just showed. And then that next week, talking to Cam, finding out, okay, where's he been? Did he just show up in this game? No, he's not getting enough reps. He's not getting enough play. That's when I remember him first catching my eye. And of course I knew the name, and we had talked about when he signed, and I was ready to see him play at that level, but it was noticeable.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing about, D tackles really jump off the screen. They're really close to the quarterback. Edge rushers, everybody talks about how edge rushers can bend that corner. Yes, but, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And when you're that close, again, Mark, I'm telling you club swim right over that center guard, the running back and quarterback is literally standing right there. You don't have to really go around too many other people if you're right up the gut. And as of late, of course, you had Warren Sapp and you've had some Aaron Donald, recent Johnny Randall defensive tackles that have really gotten after the quarterback. But finding and trying to refine the new Warren Sapp and rush up the gut is a big thing. Leonard Taylor could do it. I literally think Leonard Taylor could be a 8 to 10 sack guy at defensive tackle. I don't think that's not a shocker. Now, allowing him to be that, putting him in position to do that, that's something different. Okay, if you got a young man who's worried about, man, I don't want to lose playing time, Because although I made that play, I might get a minus because I didn't attack the veer of the neck properly. And I didn't grab the inside of it. And I didn't have my perfect hand placement. And I didn't play with perfect leverage. So coach going to pull me out for 5 plays because I didn't do my job specifically, although I made the play. Listen, there's coaches out there like that. I personally know coaches like that who, I don't like my D tackles to work spin moves, and you keep doing spin moves. So, yeah, your snaps coming down this week. There's people like that in the world. There really are. Anyway, I really like what he brings to the table.
Logan, Chris is looking for who you're excited to see this spring and on into the fall in 23.
Most excited to see. So this can be any player, no matter what rank, starter, whichever. Who I'm most excited for, I'm probably going to go with Jaheim Bell with the mixture of how Mike Norvell is going to use him. I think that's something that all of us, once we get to practices, once I see James, once he gets back over here in the 850, and we're watching practices, seeing how he's going to utilize Bell, kind of like I was bringing up earlier, because they're going to have I really like this tight end room now. I haven't been able to say that in a while, where I'm excited to talk about a Florida State tight end room now with Kyle Morlock, Marquiston Douglas, and Jaheim Bell in there. And you've got some younger guys also like Brian Courtney. Like, there's a lot to like in this room. And then also a redshirt freshman, Jarrell Powers, who I was talking about last night with you, Mark. A true freshman this last year will be a redshirt freshman, has the size, looks the part. I was making some big time moves there during the bowl game practices. I liked seeing the improvement there from him. So I like Jaheim Bell here, and probably the person that I'm most excited for. Last year, this was Jared Verse. He was the number one. I was, really stoked to see him battle against Florida State's offensive line, Alex Atkins. But this time I'm going offensive player, and it's going to be Jaheim Bell. And there's a reason why he ended up picking Florida State. There's a reason why he picked Mike Norvell. There's a reason why he picked their offense to play for to end off his career. That's a special athlete, a lot of capabilities, a lot of different ways you can use them. I'm just really key on like where are you putting them at? That's a thing. You can put them outside, you can put them in the slot, you can put them on the line, you can put them in the backfield. That's just what Bell brings to your offense. So that should excite anybody that likes watching football, college football, or definitely if you're an FSU fan. Jaheim Bell is probably my player that excites me the most going into this spring camp.
Chris, before I answer your question, because I think you're just trying to get me to nail that prediction so you can win some money. I'm going to go back to James. I'm going to go back to James, and also because I want to extend on this second question for Logan, because Logan, you pretty much covered what I'm going to ask. But if you want to throw another guy out there too, James, who's on the roster that really hasn't done anything yet, who hasn't really produced on the field, but you think could take off?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. That's one of those questions that if somebody watches it, hey, man, you think I ain't doing nothing?
I know, right? That's the thing.
I don't go sit in the baseball stands and watch these practices, Mark. I'm really up close. I'm up close personal with these guys, man.
But I mean, if they're got the ball and they're catching it, they see it, maybe we just go fall down right in your legs there and snap.
Yeah, like I'm over there on the sideline.
Positive way, they're gonna.
I'm on the sideline. They're not gonna pull up when they're running out of bounds now.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they were bad last year.
They
didn't get an opportunity.
I think Turner, at defensive end, Turner from out of St. Aug, really good defensive. Got the size, got the attributes there. Just trying to find a way to fit in. If I were trying to light a fire under somebody, I would say, number 9. He knows who he is. And, you've done something, but you ain't done nothing at the same time. Like, it's the reason why everybody's talking about Patrick Payton and they're talking about Jared Verse. Derek got to come in and, make people know who you are. I think that's where you get back to that Florida State. The Florida State that I grew up watching, when you had guys like Raynard Wilson. I just saw he had a great space the other day. I can't think of it. He was the highest drafted player in Florida State history, defensive end. Andre
Andre
Wadsworth. Oh, yeah.
Peter Boulware. You had you had like 5 or 6 cats. You had Corey. Like I always remind people that Senator Corey Simon was a backup when he was a consensus All-American. That's how deep they were at Florida State during those times. So you got to do that. I would say you got that Old Testament Azariah Thomas. Kid, they like to pout a little bit as freshmen, but you ain't did shit. You're a freshman. Go make some plays, go do something, then force the hand. Offensively, I would go and say there's the most talented player in the wide receiver core. FSU's fans, probably their only way of really knowing who he is seeing him get into it with Mike Norvell, and that's transfer Deuce Spann, and he's a tall, big wide receiver. That's a legit 4.3 kid. I think if he's, and then when you see like Malik McClain, if I remember correctly, that's the one who just left. You come in and you see him possibly taking on his role. You can see him really elevate this offense by giving us a guy, what they call cut the head off the top of the defense. Like really force those safeties to be honest, have to stay in your zone coverage. Because if you play man with a kid like this, he's going to torch you. He's going to put somebody in a bad spot.
Yep.
So that would be the only, because everybody else on offense, I mean, I can say Biscuit, but I think in Douglas, but I mean, I think I like him. I think fans are going to fall in love with him. I actually think, Jaheim Bell's going to come in and leave the impact that he's going to leave, but I think everybody's thinking Murlock is going to come in and just be a out of sight automatic starter. And I think Biscuit's going to hold down his starting job a little bit better than what people are. And I don't say they're not disrespecting him on purpose. I just think fans don't know any better. Every kid that transfers from Florida State is a quitter. Every kid that transfers into Florida State is the greatest person to ever play the game. Like, how could the other school allow this kid to leave? But the beautiful thing that we haven't had in quite some time, and with Mike Norvell, I hope he doesn't do it now. Maybe when they change the rules for transfer portal, or when he retires, he'll be able to write a book on how to build your team in the portal. Because the one thing that they have now is talent across the board, and what they look like they're recruiting is going to make them not have to rely as heavy on the portal and just get 2 or 3 of the best guys in the portal while they're getting some of the best high school seniors. It should be a fun spring. I can't wait. I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get to Tallahassee on March 6th for the first practice, because I'll be basically leaving Indianapolis to come right to Tallahassee. So, but I'm hoping I'll put the same tweet that I put out last year, that this is the best first day of spring that I've seen, and everybody, and it'll go viral, and everybody will be like, yeah, eat it up.
Yeah, I like those. I like those picks. The Byron Turner one is spot on. We saw a lot of improvement from him in the middle of the season all the way to the end. And if he puts on a little bit of size, that's going to be a huge factor for him. And then, like you said, I like Marquise. And one thing about him, the difference between him and Cam McDonald, reliability. He caught the ball. I think a lot of things we forgot. Marquise and Douglas can catch the ball and he can run with it. It's not as slim as maybe Cam McDonald was, but he can catch the ball, and if he's reliable, that's what a quarterback wants. And so if Marquise, I don't think Marquison's going to be stepping down and let anybody take a spot whatsoever. I don't think that's going to be the game plan. I think Florida State's going to try to utilize all 3 of them as much as possible, but Florida State should have a fun spring camp, at least definitely offensively, because that was some of the going into the spring. The offense there was a lot of question marks, because you were bringing in these wide receivers that just transferred over, and you're going to try to see what you're going to get out of a guy like Deuce Spann. We were wondering, what was going on with Winston Wright Jr., Micah Pittman. We just thought Johnny Wilson was really tall, and you're just going to throw it to him in the end zone. That was it. But hell no, that's not the case. You can throw it to him anywhere across the field. So I think there's going to be major question marks on Winston Wright Jr., the availability for him. And like you were bringing up, James, Deuce Spann, can he be utilized in any way, shape, or form outside of, I want to see him used in special teams. There was a question on here talking about who's going to be returning kicks this year. I want to see Deuce Spann back there, because we get to see him in practice. He's one of the returners. He doesn't get a lot of starting time back there, but he has the speed, like James said, the size. We get to see him up close. He's got all those crazy athletic attributes. It's just taking a little bit more extra coaching because he's gone from a quarterback position over to the wide receiver room. And, you see that he wants to be coached. And you saw the thing that went viral this year where Coach Norvell was going off on him for a little bit and then sat with him for a second. And then he ends up being on the field the next play and makes a grab. Like, that's just kind of how Mike Norvell is going to work things no matter what. And I think it works perfectly for a guy like Deuce Spann, who's just taking a little bit longer to get under the system, understand where he needs to be and routes and building chemistry with his quarterbacks. So I would like to see Deuce Spann make that next jump because he made a big one in that fall camp. And I think we all were expecting to see more out of him this last year, but that wide receiver room was ridiculously stacked. And Ontario Wilson held on to his own as a veteran and didn't allow any of these transfers to come in here and take his place. So we'll see. Deuce Spann, Winston Wright Jr. Will Deuce make that next step? And will we see Winston Wright Jr. play a football game in 2023 is probably one of the big question marks on offense for me right now.
8 catches for Deuce last year at Florida State. Winston Wright, 63 for West Virginia. Obviously, we expected a lot out of him. And unfortunately, now he's battling his way back, but seems to be in really good shape. James, before I answer Chris's question, did you pout as a freshman?
No. It was a lot different. I was raised way differently than a lot of people. My mom didn't even know I was good in football until they tried to, like, my freshman year, they tried to, in high school, I got an F. I passed, but I got an F in, I think earth science or something like that. So I passed with a C. And my mom was like, "You're not playing any sports." And the coaches had to beg her to let me play. And she was like, I know they say his name a lot. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I tried to, like, complain to my grandmother, and my grandmother isn't one of those good church Southern grandmothers. She's very tough, hard nosed, and she'll tell me to stop being a punk, be tough, stop crying about it, go out there and do something to make people want to play you. And that was the mentality that I took in there. And as a guy who actually, even though I was offered and I didn't make the grades, I walked on. So there was no room for me to cry and pout. If I cried and pout, I was going back to Rockbrook, 1033 apartment C. And in my mind, I said, I am not going back to that apartment. There's no way in hell I'm going back to that. So it's funny because Coach Bowden, I was going through my phone and I saw an interview with Coach Bowden, and Coach Bowden was like, I don't ever remember James complaining. He just went out there and did what he had to do. He also said I wasn't no sissy either, so which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, man, it was but I saw people pout. I saw and he ended up working out for him. Thomas Clayton was a 4-star running back for Virginia, but he came in with Lorenzo Booker, who was the number 1 prospect in the nation. Leon Washington, the number 1 athlete in the nation. Thomas Clayton, heck, I had Torrance Washington, who was a freshman in front of me. So it was 5 guys that were brought in there, and it was like who's going to play. And Tom ended up leaving to go to Kansas State, ended up being drafted. I believe he played with the 49ers for a few years. And I've seen guys like Fred Rouse pout. I've seen it happen, but this is when you're on when you're on a team where there's a bunch of alpha males and dogs, like that crying stuff doesn't fly. But good camaraderie and brotherhood will come up and tell you, hey man, stop crying. Come on, let's pull this together. And I think they're getting that now, but I think it's still they got to get some guys still can't buy into that. So they had to leave and do what was best for them, and congrats to those guys.
I figured you being you and you not being a 4-star coming in and having to work for everything you got, that you weren't pouting. I just wanted to hear what you were going to say.
Yeah, my mama wasn't playing that. She'd have probably spanked me.
Mr. HD, Cam, what do you think about the Houston offensive lineman, Cameron Johnson, hitting the portal?
Cameron, another great name. You know what I mean? Like, hey, horse and carriage, let's get it. But yeah, man, haven't really looked too much into him, but let's do that now. Cameron Johnson. Ooh, and I got to put football, don't I? I sure do. Houston. Let's see. Up error 404, so he's not on the roster anymore. So they have already removed, his page. Let's see, 6'4", 291 on his 247. He's a grad transfer. He had played offensive line. He started at left tackle for a state runner-up in high school. I mean, I'm with it. Like, if he fits, like, I'm not going to turn down, like, good, able-bodied offensive linemen. I mean, at a certain point, you are going to have to ride with who you got, but I don't think that this is the point. He was a first-team all-conference left guard last year. Oh, sign me up then. Let's go. Allowed only 1 sack and 586 pass snaps, according to Pro Football Focus. And I was reading that on the Houston Chronicle website before it's recycled.
It's in the same one.
Put the paywall up. But
yeah,
even with those two quick things that we all learned together, yeah, that'll work. A first team offensive lineman from a decent conference, obviously not Power 5 conference, but 1 sack or hurry and 586 pass blocking snaps. Yeah, that'll work. And again, you're talking about coming from Houston, so the offensive coordinator, from his time there just recently. So, yeah, you're talking about, call him. Make it like Erykah Badu's Tyrone and call him. Like, yeah, absolutely. Call him, evaluate if he wants to play in the same thing. Now, the thing about it is you're going to get to the point, even with him, where you have more bodies than you have snaps. Right? And I think that that's a good thing to have to a point on the offensive line. But if he's a grad transfer, he's going to want to come somewhere and play, right? Because he's trying to get to the league. I don't know that possibility of like a real play, like another 600 snaps. Because he was, that's 1 play a game over 14 games, 2 plays a game over 7 if they would have, converted a couple third downs. So he's a snap away, just really close to 600 offensive snaps, right? You're going to find 600 snaps or something that he can live with here in Miami on offensive line when you got Samson Okunlola early enrolled, when you have, Francis Mauigoa early enrolled, we have Jaden Rivers, the best offensive lineman on the team, still back here. You got Anez Cooper, you have, I'm even, forgetting other names, right? But I don't know that he comes in on the interior of the line. I mean, you got Matt Lee from UCF, that's your starting center. First team All-American, or first team All-Conference in the same conference as Houston, right? You got Rivers and Cooper. Mauigoa might move inside, who knows, right? And those 3 guys could be for the 2 interior spots. I'm probably even like overlooking Sagapolu and a couple other dudes, right? And there is the chance, because Miami does, or Cristobal and Mirabal cross-train offensive linemen, as in pretty much everybody practices everywhere, right? Because you never know where you're going to have to go. That's why it was like a big thing. Everybody's like, oh my God, on the first day of practice, there's a surprise starter at left tackle because Zion Nelson's not in. Jalen Rivers working at left tackle, because you cross-train everywhere, and that's a thing that's been done. But is that guy going to come in? And maybe he does. Where he comes in, he snatches a spot and he gets his however many snaps to be happy? Or does he get to work with, a coach that he's known already in Shannon Dawson, gets to get coached up by a very good offensive line coach in Mirabal and Cristobal, or very good offensive line coaches, and then sacrifice some of his current year snaps for the potential to move forward towards the league next year? I can't speak to that. I don't know if that's the thing that he would want to do, but I know I do agree with the chat where they're saying, hey, the first thing we need to do is call him, because we're still in the rebuilding phase of that offensive line, bringing as many dudes as possible who can play and let it work itself out. And if he decides, to go somewhere else where the path to the field might seem a little easier or more sure, hey, obviously as a grad transfer, you're trying to get paid like this is your money year, right? So, I mean, not in the NIL way. I mean, as in towards your professional career. But yeah, call him, bring him down. If he wants to join the team and it works out, great. If not, good luck, Godspeed.
So unless I'm missing something, the key term here is that he has announced that he will enter the transfer portal, because no one can enter the transfer portal until, I believe the date is May 1st.
Correct. Yeah. So he's like already put it out there. Hey, when the portal opens the next window, I'm in there. Holla at me. So, and I went on the first page where I said, 404 not found, was the University of Houston roster page for Mr. Johnson, and it's already been taken down. So yeah.
He has figured out a very convenient way to skip spring practice. Because he's not going to do spring practice.
Or he was meeting with the coaches and everything, got this new offensive coordinator. The guy that I was playing for is not here. The way that we're going to go, whatever it doesn't look like I want to be a part of that. Who knows? But like other people have done that. Like Lawrence Cager did that when he was at Miami. He was like, I'm going to transfer, but like not now when I graduate. Back when you had to have the grad transfer to get free movement. So he's like, hey, I'm letting y'all know in January, February, like I will be transferring, to set himself up to, have that potential move in the future. Yeah.
Did he go to spring practice?
I do not believe so.
Okay. We, of course, had many more cases of this last year, this past bowl season, than we did the previous year, where there was a light on Emory Jones, because he was the one guy that I knew of who was playing for a team in Florida against UCF in the bowl game. And he had already stated and already entered the transfer portal. So he was in the transfer portal, but they needed a quarterback with reps and with experience to play in a bowl game. But this past this past bowl season, that there were quite a few guys that did that still played for their existing team, even though they entered the transfer portal.
Hey man, do the job you have while you have it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm looking for a new one, but like I'm work this job right here to the best and fullest of my abilities until I leave. Because
it's also interesting from a leverage standpoint, because obviously if you're the coaching staff and you don't need that guy, he's not a guy of value, then you're like, yeah, we'll put you on the bench. And if 3 guys get hurt, you'll be on the field. But otherwise, even though you've kind of dissed us to a certain extent, depending on the relationship, hey, if we want to win this bowl game, and if you can bring, the goods, then we'll play you still.
Well, I mean, it's just every situation is different. It's not always contentious. You know what I mean? Like, hey, like I had to do a thing, or whatever, or like you're looking out professionally. I was, always thinking about, back into my teaching career. But I remember we had a performance, and a student came up to me and was like, yo, like my parents want to take me out of here to a private school, like at the end of the day. And I'm like, you showed up in your uniform. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to shuttle you off of this organization. You've always done the work. You've been here. If you desire to perform with us one last time, great. And it was just kind of it was a situation of circumstance in that way. Now I understand that it's very different with players, where like they hold their own agency, where they're making the active choice, not like my mama told me I got to go, which is what that was. So it's not directly analogous, but like these things have happened, you know what I mean? And but it's been, but then, the coaching staff on the other side has to do kind of a cost benefit analysis as well, because like those are those guys' careers, you know what I mean? And like, if they have performance benchmarks, which they do, and they have evaluative benchmarks, which they do, they can't just say, okay, bye, and then punt on whatever game, or, what if they're 175 yards away from a passing bonus goal for the year? What if they're, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things they got to consider too. It's like, yeah, this kid is leaving, and that is not great for the future, but for right now, so that I keep this job and that $250,000 bonus that can go towards whatever. I'm gonna find a way to get over that so that we can make that happen today, right now.
When you think Georgia, you think championships first and foremost, but then you think defense. And defense has been the calling card for years, and especially in 2021, but also in 22 with a little more support from the offense. We're talking defense. We're talking spring football. Got Anthony Dasher on the line from Rivals, UGAsports.com. Hey, Anthony, what's going on?
Well, how's it going? I'm doing great.
I am doing just fine. I appreciate you doing these for us. You can catch Anthony and myself. We broke down the offensive side, did all the positions, so check out those videos in particular. Unfortunately, we're not just going to talk football. We got to talk about this situation involving Jamon Dumas Johnson. So it's a serious situation. What is the latest in regards to where the program stands?
Well, for those who don't know, Jamon was cited. Well, let me kind of back up a second. Back on January 10th, the day after the championship, Jamon's vehicle and another vehicle were clocked by Athens Clark County Police speeding and drag racing. They were seen drag racing. 2 misdemeanor charges, and it was last week. Jamon basically, turned himself in, and that's really all we really know right now. I mean, both charges are misdemeanors, so that being the case, I would imagine it's just going to be a case of Jamon spending a lot of extra time with strength coach Scott Sinclair, doing some early morning running, that sort of thing. But I don't believe it's going to have any effect on him playing. He may wind up getting suspended for the first game, but it's not going to be a long-term situation. It's not a good thing to happen, obviously, and Kirby Smart certainly does not condone this. The school doesn't condone it, but it's nothing that's going to keep it from playing next year.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a balanced approach to take, that you take it seriously. Certainly, it's something that shouldn't be tolerated, but at the same time, we all have made mistakes, and we all need to learn, and we all need to be given grace for those mistakes and move on and show some accountability and get over it. All right, let's talk some football. Let's talk defensive front. Jalen Carter, of course, the headliner who moves on. Can you set the interior out to the ends for us?
Sure. It's losing Jalen, and I mean, he may wind up being the number one pick is not a good thing from Georgia's perspective, but still, you're talking about a football team. We've talked about this before in the offense, the great job they do recruiting. They're just going to plug somebody else in, and who that might be, we'll have to wait and see. But you look across the front for Georgia next year, it's going to be, I think, Nazir Stackhouse. His back had a great season last year. Will be the main guy at nose, and you've got Michael Williams, who did a great job at defensive end. Last season. I think as he approaches the sophomore year, I think he's going to have a chance to be a very good player. But a guy to watch, so I think, is going to be Bear Alexander. We saw him in the championship game against TCU. Had a couple of sacks, and is probably going to be the guy who I think is ultimately going to step into to Jalen's spot at that defensive tackle position. But again, it's a deep. They've got other players, so it's a deep defensive front. You'll still see Georgia rotating 7, 8, 9, 10 guys, and so even though you lose somebody like Jalen Carter, who was just one of the bigger, I think, disruptors in college football last year, the cupboard again is still not going to be empty for Georgia next fall.
Yeah, for guys like you that are covering this team or any team in college football day after day after day after day, you're obviously familiar with all the personnel, know the roster like the back of your hand. For somebody like me that knows 15 or 20 players on every team and is trying to cover everybody at the same time, it's interesting to hear a name like Bear Alexander, because some of these guys get recruited, and even if they're 5-star recruits, they may get lost depending on the situation for a year and a half, maybe 2 seasons, and then boom, they pop up like he did in the championship game. And I was like, Bear Alexander, that dude was a huge recruit. I forgot about him.
Yeah, it was a huge recruit, one of the top recruits in the signing class, a season ago. And like most freshmen, it took him a little while to get adjusted. And be able to learn the defense. But really about the second half of the season, you start seeing Barry in the lineup on third down, and it wasn't a surprise to people again who've been watching his team that he was able to step up and do what he did. And I expect great things from him moving forward.
So Anthony addressed the situation with Jamon Dumas-Johnson at linebacker, 70 tackles last year, 9 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. So Robert Beal, Nolan Smith gone to the NFL, correct?
That is correct. 2 big losses at outside linebacker. That's probably, I won't say it's going to be the weakest position. It's going to be the position I think has had more opportunities for guys. And somebody, again, another name that people will know his father, Marvin Jones Jr., came in kind of like Bear on the defensive front, came in about the second half of the season and really started to establish himself. He's a guy who's like 6'5", 245 pounds, as a guy who can run sideline to sideline. And we saw him on third down a lot this season. He's actually in the lineup for Georgia at the very end of the Peach Bowl against Ohio State when Ohio State was driving. He was the linebacker they had in at the game at that time on the outside spot. So you've got him. Chad Chambliss has the most experience. He's coming back. But, again, this is a position that Georgia has recruited, extremely well. And they've signed some incoming freshmen they've got this year, too. I mean, Damon Wilson is a guy who is very highly regarded, and you're going to see him, I think, have an opportunity to play. So even though it's, I think, maybe the most inexperienced spot for Georgia, from a talent standpoint, again, you're looking at guys who were at the top of that position in the country in high school. So it's going to be a matter of them getting experience.
All you have to do is look at the Georgia stat sheet on defense, and it looks similar to, you can match it to what actually happens on the field in regards to rotations. Because if you go to most teams, you're going to see dudes with double-digit sacks, double-digit TFLs all over the place, and then it drops off because obviously they're depending on those guys, their frontline players. Where Georgia, it's just waves and waves and waves of players, so nobody compiles just ridiculous stats because they come at you with so many players.
Yeah, they rotate. I mean, that's the big thing. You've got to be 100% come fourth quarter as far as not getting tired or anything like that. And Georgia can do that every position on defense and just send guys in, rotate. I mentioned on the defensive front, you'll see him rotate as many as 10 guys, and on the outside back, you'll see him rotate as many as 5 or 6. I mean, just if they want to, they could do it every play. Send somebody in and it won't have much of a drop off. So that's going to be that's been a key for Georgia under Kirby Smart, and I think it'll continue to be so.
Keely Ringo seems to be the next in line from the cornerback positions. That's going to be a high draft pick. Christopher Smith also moves on from the secondary. Set us up there.
Yeah, well, that's that extra safety spot is going to be open, and finding a replacement for Keely is going to be big. But again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. They've got some young guys, lined up. Of course, one spot at corner. I'll just start there. You've got Kamari Lassiter, who started every game for Georgia last year, but this year you want to be looking at guys like a Nyland Green, for example. And again, they've signed some other freshmen they've got coming in. They think can make a big impact. And that's going to be probably one of the more interesting battles, as well on defense, because again they got a lot of young guys who are coming in as early enrollees will have a chance to play. And it's safety. That's one guy I do want to mention. Malachi Starks, who came as a true freshman, played a lot. Janelle Aguero from Pennsylvania, I believe is where he's from, has a chance, I think, to really kind of be that next level safety. I don't know if he's going to come in and start for Christopher right away, because Georgia does have some a little bit of experience, back there. But again, that's a position they really made a big effort in recruiting this past year, trying to get as many guys. And I think they signed like six defensive backs, and I think all those guys have a chance to be competing for playing time early on.
So you made the one comment about Wilson up front in regards to him possibly making an impact from the 23 class. And this is probably, Anthony, a better question for about 6 weeks from now after you've seen some spring football, the spring game, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway.
Yep.
With the transfer portal additions, with the 23 class, who do you think has the best chance of making some noise this fall?
Damon, I mentioned Damon a while ago, probably has, in my opinion, probably got the best opportunity because I think he's just physically, ready. ready right now, but there are some other linebackers as well. Yeah, Braylon has a chance, I think, to come in, and I don't think he's going to compete for starting role early on. But he's going to be a guy on special teams, and I think you'll see him, have a chance at maybe break to the second unit. Jalen Walker's a guy who was a freshman last year. They play some on outside back, but I think he's going to be moving back to inside. He'll have a chance, I think, to play early on. But that's the thing about these freshmen. All these freshmen too. Like, they don't have there's not any kind of pressure on any of these guys to come in and play right away. Just more for early on. I think they'll get mostly special teams looks, but you'll see them have some opportunities, I think, as the year goes on.
All right, Anthony. Well, we appreciate you stopping by. Appreciate the breakdown on Georgia as they go to spring practice. When?
They start spring practice. I believe they haven't had an official date yet, but pro day is on the 15th. They usually start a day after. So I'm guessing March 16th will be the first day they're out there.
Good stuff. Anthony, we always appreciate the time.
Yeah, man, anytime.
What will the new offense, what does all this mean for 2024 potential recruit Jaden Davis with 6 crystal balls, right, to Michigan? And apparently his big thing, from what I've been kind of reading around online, is not so much NIL, but like, does he have opportunities to throw the ball? Right.
I mean, yeah, he absolutely does. I think, he could, be a guy who plays early. That doesn't necessarily mean freshman year, because I could also see a situation where JJ McCarthy comes back his senior year, regardless of his production his junior year. He just strikes me as that type of player. But I mean, I think that's the whole point right now, is because you don't have an obvious heir apparent to JJ McCarthy. And while Davis Warren, they think, is a 4-star, they feel like they really lucked out. They got a guy that is, would be starting a lot of other places. And, they stole Alex Orji away from Virginia Tech, and they like his ability to be a dual threat. Like I mentioned, Jaden Denegal being a 4-star, right. Kendrick Bell, like I said, never count out a Bell. Nonetheless, being a 5-star, he's not necessarily as highly thought of as some of the other 5-stars in 2024. But
interesting,
being a 5-star, being the guy that Michigan's been all in on, being a guy that they're trying to bring in his teammates, Channing Goodwin, who's the son of Jonathan Goodwin,
right?
Being a receiver and all, and they're really, it could be a situation. I'm assuming they're really pitching really hard of like, you can do what you're doing at the high school level at college. And you can do it with other great players. You can do it with this offensive line, all of this kind of stuff. I'm surprised he hasn't committed yet. I don't know really what the holdup has been. Usually that doesn't tend to bode well for a school, but it doesn't really seem like it's going to matter that much, because all the other schools he seems to be considering keep on filling up. And while sometimes there's a couple here and there where it's like, oh, they might get back into it, whether it's Clemson or Ohio State or whatever. It's a matter of, Michigan's still the one that's pressing the hardest, and they've really not recruited any other quarterbacks except for Jim Harbaugh going to seeing Dylan Raiola and a little bit of conversations with Michael Van Buren at St. Francis Academy. So I think that that bodes well for Michigan as far as being able to get him. It sounds like he's going to make a decision sometime in the next couple weeks here, finally.
Yeah, he wants to get it over with. And apparently he is visiting one more time in the spring, from what I was seeing. So hopefully they can use that opportunity so that Jaden and Kirk Campbell can get together, because I know that was a kind of an unknown. Is like, how are they going to gel? Kirk Campbell being the new QB's coach, and what that dynamic is going to be like. But hopefully Harbaugh is able to close that down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's, if you're going to keep on doing this, we're going for one quarterback a year scenario, you absolutely need to get the guy this year. It's one thing if you lose out on Dante Moore, a guy you've been recruiting since like 2017, you know, and you lose out on him. That's a huge loss. It doesn't matter as much as long as you get that next guy here. Now he might get thrown to the wolves, you know, if JJ McCarthy leaves and say, you know, they feel like Jaden Davis gives them the best opportunity to win right away. But, you know, that might be something that he's looking for. I mean, careful what you wish for when you're a quarterback. You know, you don't want to come out and play as a true freshman most of the time. You want at least a year. I mean, or the best case scenario, I think, is getting to be what JJ had, where he comes in, runs a couple plays, and goes back on the bench, isn't really responsible for much. So, I mean, Michigan can pitch him the world. They have been pitching them the world. It's just pull the trigger. But at the same time, like you know, I think that they could get back in the Michael Van Buren sweepstakes if they were so inclined. I think that would be a good move. But obviously they've been all eggs in on Jaden Davis. Close out, get him. It's worked well the last time he brought a 5-star quarterback in. You hope that the same type of deal happens here.
All right, Ty. Based on those conversations that you've had with those various writers and based on your own perspective on this football team, they're going to spring practice here. And what do they need to work on? What are the priorities?
Oh my gosh. They're going to be without Drew Sanders. And I made a comment a couple of weeks ago. Some people didn't really like, but I said, you don't have another Drew Sanders on defense. And they don't, Mark. Drew Sanders was a big-time 5-star, went to Alabama. You know, he was good enough to get some time there. And then, thank God, thanks to Michael Schur and Barry Odom, you pull him here. And he was outstanding. I mean, he graded out high as a guy that could cover. And he was obviously he could pass rush when they lined him up off the ball. When they lined him up out in the flats, shooting off the line of scrimmage, he could chase down quarterbacks. You know, I was a little shocked that the NFL Combine actually has him at 6'4". Standing next to him, I would have thought 6'6". You know, of course, he's got cleats and a helmet on, but very long torso, long. It looked like he had long arms, really good reach, something that's so important for these edge rush guys. They don't have another Drew Sanders on this defense. They do, however, have a potential who I think could be, by the time he leaves Arkansas, an All-American caliber linebacker in Christopher Paul, who is a freshman All-American. Now, he's smaller. He's not going to, I mean, who knows, but he's not the kind of guy you're going to expect to line up off the edge and rush the quarterback. He's going to play that. He's going to be more on the ball. You know, he's not Drew Sanders, but he is a terrific linebacker. 6'3", I forgot his weight, 235 maybe. Really active kid, smart, good head on his shoulders on the field, just a terrific player. I mean, he stood out in camp. He stood out in practice. Really good player. Did not shock me when he made freshman All-American. They've also got Jordan Crook. They've got Manny Powell. They've got some names at linebacker, but that is going to be a spot to keep an eye on. I mean, listen, you asked me, I'm going to tell you they're all spots to look at, to keep an eye on. But I would say areas of concern, I would probably say tight end on offense. Trey Knox transferred to South Carolina, and that was I think that was a pretty significant loss. When you look, they're going to have to lean on probably either Nathan Bax, or they're going to have to rely on a freshman or a redshirt freshman, Ty Washington. So there's a lot of questions at tight end for me. But wide receiver, I love what they did in terms of recruiting there, Mark. I mean, they went out and they got this Tyrone Broden kid out of Bowling Green who's 6'7", 6'6", 210. Isaac Tesla. I think it's actually pronounced Tesla, but I don't know. Tesla's just sounds cooler. Tesla was, I mean, if you watch his videos on YouTube, I posted something a little while back on Twitter. That dude, he looks like he has a catch radius very similar to Treylon Burks. And ironically, he's similar in size. Now, I'm not comparing him to Treylon Burks, so please pump your brakes before you start coming at me with, how dare you compare him to Burks? But he very similar measurables in terms of, he's rumored to be a low 4.5 guy. Well, that's what Burks ran at the NFL Combine. Rumored to have a 40-inch vertical. He's got a video where he's just making these one-handed grabs. In another video, he's beating DBs who take an angle on him, and it looks like they have a pretty good angle, and he's still doing a pretty good job of beating them. Now, again, I don't know how legit that 4.5 40 is, because coming from a small school, that's a hand time 40. So he might be slower than that. I don't know, but he's pretty athletic. He's definitely got a great leap. If you watch him, good. He looks like, from highlight videos, he looks like he's got pretty good hands. Tesla's a guy that a lot of people are excited about. Tyrone Broden, again, that tall wide receiver, lengthy. They also pulled Andrew Armstrong, another wide receiver, out of Texas A&M. It's not A&M. It's like, I forgot. It's some small school out of Texas. But Andrew Armstrong, 6'3", 180 pounds. But I'm still concerned there because you don't have a lot of. There's no proven depth there, right? You don't have someone that you look at and you're just like, oh my God, this guy, potential first team all conference, second team all conference. They don't have that we know of yet. So I've got questions in certain areas on the offense.
Broden, 7 touchdown receptions, 32 catches there at Bowling Green last season, 74 catches in his career.
Yeah. Someone asked me, I'd love to know what Ty thinks of the coordinator situation for the Hogs.
I don't know if they're alluding to anything in particular that's happened or just your assessment of both sides of the ball.
So we know they Barry Odom went to UNLV. He's a head coach over there. And then they lost Kendall Briles in a very bizarre situation. I still don't know what to make of that. It was so strange. I guess Sam Pittman didn't like that he kept his name out there, I guess, to be for someone like TCU to come and, offer him. Or I really don't understand that what really happened in that situation. Very bizarre. I think TCU got themselves a pretty good offensive coordinator. Dan Enos, and I guess I haven't talked to you since they hired Dan Enos. I'm just now realizing that. We know he was here in 2015, put up incredible numbers. I mean, Brandon Allen, oh my God. I really think Brandon Allen could look back on his career and go, without Dan Enos, I'm not sure I'm still in the NFL. Now, him as a quarterback developer, that's what Dan Enos does. He develops quarterbacks. That's what he does. He was at Maryland the last couple of years, somewhat balanced attack. He had Tua Tagovailoa's little brother as a quarterback at Maryland. He's not an offensive coordinator that's on an upwards trajectory. So a lot of Hog fans not super thrilled that he's back. I think it's an interesting fit because KJ, who's a proven quarterback in this league, we know what he is. You know what you're getting out of a KJ Jefferson. The backfield, Mark, is just loaded. I think this is one of the top 2, top 3 backfields in the SEC, and that's saying a lot. The offensive line situation, we'll see where they're at. They're going to be without Dalton Wagner, without Ricky Stromberg. Those are 2 interesting losses. Those are 2 guys that could get drafted. Stromberg certainly will, I believe, get drafted. We'll see about Wagner. He's kind of got his work cut out for him there, tight end, wide receiver, like I just mentioned. I see that as a year one. To me, I'm expecting pretty good numbers. Again, you have a leader in KJ, a guy that knows this league now. He's been a starter for 2 years. His redshirt freshman year, he started on the road against Mizzou and put up great numbers, was fantastic against a pretty salty defense at the time. Comes back the next year and puts on a show, and then this last year, he was obviously really good. Dan Enos, it feels like he's walking into a pretty good situation when you talk about the backfield and the quarterbacks. And I think the offensive line should be better, or at least close to being where they were at last year. And they kind of fell apart there towards the end of the season. I like the hire year one. After that, Mark, I do not know what to expect. I really don't. I don't know if this is a good long-term thing or not. If he's here for 4 years, let's say 3 years, right? Kind of the average lifespan of a coordinator at a place like Arkansas. I don't know if it'll be a good ending to his story or not at Arkansas. I don't know if he'll leave it better than the way he found it, because Kendall Briles did a pretty good job here. I had issues with him. I certainly did. His red zone numbers were not good. Scoring offense, really, up until the bowl game, was not good. Now, the bowl game, you looked really good because you played a typical Big 12 defense. You should rack up touchdowns and offense against a Big 12 defense, and they did that. So his numbers were a little bit inflated. I think overall Kendall was at least a pretty good offense coordinator, maybe even peaking on a really good coordinator for Arkansas. I did have issues with him in the red zone and his scoring. They were very up and down, not real consistent there. Dan Enos is, you want to say he's got big shoes to fill. Year one, he could fill them. After that, I don't know. Now, for the defense, Travis Williams, he's an up-and-comer. We know he has history with Auburn. He was down at UCF for a couple of years, known to be a really good recruiter. He's known to be a good players coach. I love that they brought Marcus Woodson on to be a co-defense coordinator who's going to help with the secondary. They've also brought on Darren Wilson, who's going to help out with the secondary. He has history. I couldn't tell you. I know he's with Southern Miss for a little while. They're really trying to tackle the issues in the secondary this year, Mark, because they were so bad in pass defense last year. It was abysmal how bad they were. It was really tough. And they're trying to address that. And I really think Sam has done a good job of at least trying to address it. It may not work out. We don't know. But Marcus Woodson apparently has had quite a bit to do with Florida State's secondary and their coverage plan last year. Sound like I'm selling you cell phone coverage. The Florida State cell coverage was fantastic last year on the field. And they believe that Marcus, I mean, from what I've read and listening to Florida State fans and watching them on Twitter, they feel like Marcus Woodson had a lot to do with that. So he's going to come over. He's going to help with that at Arkansas. You've got Quincy McAdoo back, right? You've got some pieces back. They've got Hudson Clark back at middle safety. Dwight McLaughlin, who's considered, according to Pro Football Focus, as one of the top corners coming back in the SEC. They should be better in a lot of areas. Now, I don't know if they're going to be better at getting after the quarterback because, like I said, you're without Drew Sanders. You're not going to have that elite edge rush guy. You've got Landon, the young Jackson. Is that his name? Am I farting on his name? The defensive end from LSU. It's been a while since I've talked about him. Huge guy. They've got him back. He'll be a red shirt. What is he, a sophomore? But the defense is going to look different. The offense is going to look different. You're going to see more pistol formation, right? You're going to see Enos has implemented RPO. I was watching his Maryland film. He has implemented RPO into his offense. He has adapted his offense. I think something he's really good at doing is calling the kind of offense that the offense is capable of running. Whatever kind of personnel he has, that's what he's going to try and utilize. He's not going to just straight up stick with one particular brand. Like, he's not like an air raid guy, no matter where he goes. He's going to run with what he can work with. But you will see a lot of pistol, right? They're going to, like I said, they're going to run RPO. Probably going to be a run-heavy team again this year. And why not? You're loaded to do that. But overall, I have really good opinions on these hires. I mean, again, the tight end coach, Morgan Turner, this guy was at Stanford and churned out. It was an NFL. They're just an NFL product at tight end. That was a great hire for Arkansas. We'll see if these guys can all adapt what they did really well and bring it together and bake a really delicious pie in Fayetteville, because they're going to need to. Fans aren't super thrilled about the Enos hire overall. They're not blown away by the Travis Williams hire. And I don't blame them. These aren't big names, but Arkansas football's not really been in a position to hire those kind of names in a while. Not that they never have been, because they certainly have. But lately, they're still trying to build up that reputation. So we'll see what happens. But it's going to be a very interesting spring camp. It's going to be. I'm hoping I get some access to it with a press pass. I'm hoping I get opportunities to go see it in person, and can't wait. If I do, can't wait to talk about it. That's for sure.
At Florida, of course, we've got a situation, Brent, where Austin Armstrong takes a pit stop at Alabama where he was going to settle in as an outside linebackers coach, and suddenly, boom, he's the main guy at Florida. He takes that opportunity. It's a great one, of course, to try to correct that Gators defense that despite all the criticism of Will Muschamp as a head coach there at Florida, we have not seen a Gator defense that's been a elite unit since he left campus, pretty much.
Yeah, I agree with that very much, and that's something that has got to change with them, and I think Armstrong can do that. He's only 29 years old. Mark, how about being a coordinator in the SEC at 29? That's amazing to say the least. But look, this guy is really well thought of. I mean, what he did at Southern Miss last year, I mean, they were in the top 10 nationally in multiple categories defensively. So they're very excited with what they've got. Now, he had a previous relationship at Louisiana with Billy Napier. So that's how these guys came to know each other. And I think it's a great hire. And he only had a cup of coffee at Alabama, but then he decided to come to Florida with Napier, which I think has got a lot of folks excited. I think what I've heard that he will do is they'll be more aggressive, probably blitz more often, and be able to get to the quarterback a little bit more. So that's going to be important. I thought another interesting change was Russ Callaway, who is named the tight end coach. He was on the staff more as an analyst as much as anything else. The thing that intrigues me about Russ Callaway, he did have some time with LSU as an analyst too, but he was at Samford from 2017 to 2019. And people may not follow Samford, and I get that, meaning Samford from, not Stanford, but Samford from Birmingham, they had a really good offense and a much better team there than some people may understand. So I think that's a good hire from your staff to make him tight ends coach. Would be interesting to see where that goes. Big game to start the season again with Utah. Now, we have heard, I think you probably have too, that Utah game at Utah this year, was at Florida last year, is going to be on Thursday night of Labor Day weekend, which will make it a very attractive game to say the least. So a lot of work to do at Florida. They made a lot of changes, but I still think Napier is going to get the job done there. I think he's still a very good coach. He's brought in a lot of analysts, was mentored by Nick Saban and Dabo Sweeney. It's two of the best. And it's going to take some time because he just had to make some wholesale changes in that roster. He had to get some guys who wanted to be there, Mark. They're going to be good running the ball. Their offensive line is going to be good. Issue for them too. So glad to see the emphasis on that side of the ball, Mark.